it's my great pleasure to welcome Konstantinos Alexopoulos, who is the Chief of the Transport Facilitation and Economic Section at the United Nations. Now, he's not going to give a speech to you. We are going to have a dialogue, which is a very good Greek word. Although I hope that he will be doing much more of the talking than I will. So, Konstantinos, the COVID-19 challenge, it's been going on now for well over a year, and it has kept me from traveling. I haven't been to Greece for 18 months or so. So one of the lessons that we as a world have learned, and in particular, what is the lesson that the United Nations has learned?
John, thanks very much for giving me the floor, and thanks very much for the invitation. I'm really honored to be here with you today, and I'm really very glad that you go to Greece quite often, and I hope will be the case quite soon. Now, related to the COVID-19 now situation, the truth is that, and me working in the United Nations in transport, the truth is that transport family was not really prepared for such a challenge globally. Governments and the transport industry found themselves unprepared, or if you wish, without having any protocol, guidelines, agreed internationally or even regionally, in order to address the challenge. I believe that this is the first very important lesson learned after dealing with the pandemic for a year and a half now. But if you permit me, John, let's see what really happened during the period March, May last year. Government reacted like we were in 40s and 50s. They actually closed the borders and they asked everybody to stay home. Practically, what did happen? They changed trading and consumption patterns in one night. So they decided to reduce access to trade and permitted consumption 1 kilometer radius around the households, which means only from neighbor and local shops. So this practically risked to transform the health crisis to an economic one. If on the top, if you wish, we add the fear that many people felt for the unknown and the buying hysteria, I will call another nice Greek word, due mainly to psychological reasons, meaning buying more that I need just in case, we could easily understand why it happened in many cities, including the Western European ones, in Geneva, for instance, where I work, that we had shortages in food and basic daily products, such as toothpaste, for instance. But I think this is a very important lesson learned. Yes, please.
But it seems to me that actually the logistics industry actually reacted pretty quickly. It's true that you suddenly had borders being closed, but if you take, for example, the UK, which is very dependent on imports from the European Union in particular, food, all sorts of goods. I think there was hardly a day in which there was not some kind of a ferry crossing or a plane arriving and so on. And so, you mentioned the word hysteria. Yes, there was hysteria. People sort of buying lots and lots of toilet paper, for goodness sake. But actually, nobody ran out of food, and things seemed to get almost back to normal. I'm putting normal in quotation marks quite quickly.
Well, to be honest with you, if we say it from the perspective of United Nations, meaning globally, it took like a kind of a domino effect, and of course I was referring to exactly the first month, March, April 2020, where the governments reacted like this, and they saw immediately what were the impacts of their policies. So they are trying to adapt, and they took some of these policies back. You know something? I believe that indeed there is interconnection between COVID-19 and logistics, and this is, in my opinion, not the delivery of the e-business packages home that everybody speaks about. It is the fact that we all realize that the principal vaccine against COVID-19, it's not called Pfizer or Moderna or AstraZeneca, but let me exaggerate, and I will say that it's called logistics and transportation, and I will explain why. If the logistics, the transportation, and the customs systems were fully digitalized already and interconnected, then countries wouldn't have to close the borders, wouldn't have to stop trade flows, wouldn't care so much about the 1 kilometer radius, since logistics chains could easily cover, the increased need by delivering next day, etc., etc. So governments could focus only on the health crisis without spending time about organizing the closure of borders. Leave apart, of course, that even today that we are discussing, not some months ago, today, still there are supply chains that are suffering since spare parts, final products, or raw materials still cannot be delivered. You know, I read this morning, just to reply to exactly to your question, this morning actually, in Shenzhen port in China, there are 100 container ships stuck there. They cannot leave the port because they had many incidents of COVID, and now the authorities there, they decided to close the port.
Yeah.
This means that imagine how many commodities are stuck there in the warehouses, in the storage places inside the port or around. So already, I mean, we can see in different geographical places, because as I said, it's a domino effect, there are disruptions in the supply chains and there are issues there.
So the workforce is simply not being allowed to go into the port at Shenzhen, for example, and load the containers, fill them up, and so on. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
I think that the EU has been pretty efficient in allowing truck drivers and so on to cross borders with testing themselves with lateral flow tests and so on. Isn't that a sort of a triumph within Europe? I mean, I'm not sure whether it would extend necessarily to other parts of the world.
Well, indeed. First of all, me working in Geneva, and the European countries are the major countries that we're working with, but not only. It includes also Central Asia, Russia, etc. So I will give you an example. If you remember, or if you have seen, there are photos of truck drivers between the borders of Poland and Germany, where all of a sudden, if I'm not mistaken now, the Polish customs decided, or the German customs decided, that the truck drivers should have a COVID certificate in order to cross the borders. And this happened in one night, and then the poor people, the poor truck drivers, stayed there for like 2 or queues. In the next session will be Mr. Umberto De Preto from IRU, and he will give you more examples like that. So practically in EU, inside EU, we had such problems, we had such a big issues. And you know what? As the United Nations, because of these reasons, in March last year, we developed this observatory on border crossing status due to COVID-19, where we're collecting regularly, even on a daily basis, what is the situation, what is the status of the borders at this day, if possible. So we could really communicate to all over the world what is really happening in different regions, in different states. And we managed to collect, and it's still there, it's still up with updated information from 174 member states. So practically, to answer your question, yes, there were some problems 1 month in one region, then they were adapting by taking new measures, and then this problem was transferred to another region because they thought that this was a good practice. Let's copy paste it, which of course it was not a good practice. It was a bad practice, and that's why actually I started my intervention by saying that we were not prepared, and we were not prepared because there were no guidelines, protocols to be followed.
Do
We
you
didn't
think,
know really what to do.
I'm going back to this word hysteria. Do you think there's a certain sort of political hysteria by governments in which they are, they just react too quickly and too firmly without really, they always say they're following the science, but I wonder if that is really true. I have a nephew at the moment in Laos who's had a bad motorbike crash, and he cannot get to hospital in Bangkok because the border, Thai-Laotian border, is basically closed. And that's the rigmarole of trying to get, certification about COVID and so on, to get from Laos, from Vientiane to Bangkok is virtually impossible.
Indeed, and this is the case in many places. Yesterday, I was talking to a colleague of mine. He came from Serbia. He's from Serbia, actually. And he told me, look, I have this, what they call green certificate. I have done actually the vaccine, the Pfizer one, but in Serbia. So when he was coming to Switzerland, they asked him to have the PSR, how they call it, okay? So to prove that he doesn't have COVID. And they actually were not accepting this green certificate. Why? Because there is no agreement yet. There is no harmonization. He has done the Pfizer, though, vaccine, which actually I have done also. So I can fly. Yeah, you see, so I can fly from Switzerland without any problem. Okay, but because he did it in Serbia, he couldn't come here without having a really proof. Okay, and have done the test. So what I want to say is that really there is no harmonization. We didn't know, it's not bad, but also to react with such a way, like closing the borders for everybody, it proved that it's not a good practice. It didn't actually make you safe lives from COVID, but actually almost risked to create or to transform you with the health crisis to an economic one. Maybe UK, you didn't see it so obviously, but I'm telling you, in Geneva, they didn't have toothpastes and of course toilet paper, and it did not just happen. Yeah.
I don't know. The British seem to obsess about toilet paper more than about toothpaste. but I wonder. Do you think the UN could somehow get a harmonized view on testing and on COVID-19 passports? I mean, travel certificates. I mean, for example, I would like very much to go to France soon. I have doubly vaccinated. I think France will accept my my Pfizer certificate, etc. But it will also demand, or it is demanding, that I take a PCR test within 72 hours of traveling, which I'm happy to do, although it will be quite expensive. Is it really necessary to have this particular testing regime or not?
Well, first of all, I'm not representing, as you understand, the World Health Organization, so I cannot really reply. But what I want to tell you is that I believe that at least for the European Commission territory, I think because they are the European Commission territory, so they can discuss all together and they can take quickly decisions. I think they will soon achieve such a harmonization, and the green certificate will be there. And I believe that even during July, for many other reasons, including tourism, all these obstacles will be removed. And here there is a role for UN to play globally, though, in order to facilitate the move of people, the mobility of people all over the world, as it was the case in the past, of course.
Because I imagine for Greece, for example, I mean, it must be incredibly important for the tourism industry to somehow ease up all the regulations,
Yes.
within the EU and also with America and so on.
Indeed, it did. And if I understood well, it was the Greek Prime Minister that he actually introduced the idea, if you wish, in the ministers' discussions, in the Prime Minister's discussions, because I think he also realized that this is of huge importance for the Greek economy in that sense, obviously.
Konstantinos, ευχαριστώ πολύ. I think it's been very, very nice talking to you. Enjoy Geneva, lovely city.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I hope the weather is better in Geneva than it has been in the UK recently.
Well, I don't think so. I mean, we all say it's like UK here; it rains continuously. So, but anyway, I will go to Greece soon. So,
you're a lucky man. Thank you very much indeed.
Yep.
Now let's
Thank
take
you
a
very much, John.
Thank you.
Take good care. Take good care.